I know it when I was a hippie, but a time before the hippie, that we call the dwarves in Holland. They start smoking marijuana. That's my first contact with it. And in my opinion, as I told already in the beginning, it should be legalized. And why it should be legalized, there is no reason to make it illegal. If you see that sugar, for instance, sugar has more victims in the United States as it has with smoking and it has with some other addictions. But we do not have a prohibition on sugar. So, for my part, we should legalize it.
I learned about it as I get into high school. I had some friends who was in class and say, Chat, you have to try this. I said, no, I ain't come to school today. Let me finish my schooling, and after my schooling, I would try that. On the night of the graduation, the class went camping. The guys then brought some buds, and then I got my bachelor degree that night. This is back in 1976. This is 2015. And between 1976 and 2015, I did a lot of puffing. I cut back in the last 5 years. I just do more eating now. It makes you more wise, more relaxed. And it treats the body good if you have pain. If anybody knows pain, you could ask me, I will tell you what's pain.
It becomes associated with who is going to get the money when this thing becomes legal. And that is why it became an illegal drug, as long as a particular group who is managing or manipulating it cannot make the whole growth of it. And there is where the history of illegality of hemp or cannabis came in.
Well, as an archaeologist, I'll deal some more about the history. It originates from the Himalayas. 6,000 BC, they're making rope out of it. As a matter of fact, throughout the history of this plant, making rope, hemp rope, is the main thing it's ever been used for. Its medicinal purposes were started around 3000 BC. It gets introduced into Europe around 3000 BC. As we saw, Christopher Columbus was carrying it. It was grown by most plantations in colonial times. About every single medical book written since 1500 includes hemp as one of the medical products within it. Its introduction into the Caribbean was particularly exaggerated by the indentured Indian servants from India who were coming in and bringing it in the 1840s and 50s. And their first colonies were Jamaica and in the coastal areas in Guyana and places. So it was the Indians who introduced it primarily in the Caribbean in the 1840s.
Well, I can address it somewhat from the U.S. side. Back in the 1930s and Prohibition, this was also one of the things that was under the gun, so to speak. In the 1945 era, around World War II, hemp production was then legalized again as the government needed. Oh, I'm sorry. In World War II, hemp production was then legalized again as the government needed it, and then again it was shut down. In 1970, the head of the DEA decided to classify it as a Schedule I without significant scientific data or research, promising that research would be done. Those studies never showed it.
The cannabis plant has been known for thousands and thousands of years. It was a major part of many ancient civilizations. As a matter of fact, just a few hundred years ago, it was mandatory in the United States that farmers had to grow hemp. It's important to note that the hemp plant as well has thousands of different uses, from, as you mentioned, rope to different construction uses, paper, lotions, creams, soaps, etc., etc. The list goes on and on and on. And it was a major part of many different, different economies for centuries. I'm not really sure exactly why it became illegal, but from some of the research I did, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that exist. And I believe in the early 1900s, a lot of leaders of industry came together, and there seems to be a conspiracy theory that a lot of them were threatened by the hemp plant, particularly within the textile industry, fuel industry, a lot of different industries, and basically they tried to stereotype it, or they used a lot of propaganda, such as reefer madness and other things, to make you think basically that it was a drug and it was a very harmful drug rather, and by consuming it, you'd jump out a window and kill people and do all kinds of crazy things. There was a lot of propaganda that scared people and essentially made the plant criminal, and I guess the conspiracy theory behind that is that it was manipulated by heads of different industries. But yeah, it's been around for thousands, it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and really in all its time of known usage by man, it's only been illegal for about 1% of that time frame.
As many people have talked about, the roots go very far in terms of this medicinal application for marijuana. In 2900 BC, Fu Xi, he was a Chinese emperor, he used it for gout. It's written at length in nausea and pain, other substances. The Hebrew, in the book of Exodus, the Hebrews used it for different types of ailments. In 1250 BC, the Egyptians were using it for glaucoma and for tremors at that point in time. And, you know, you hear where you fast forward to Sanjay Gupta has talked about his seizure. He has a very fascinating story about a woman who has seizures 2,000 times a day, and with the medicine now is down to twice a day. These have really come to the forefront. 1830, Irish guy, William O'Shaughnessy, from the British India Export Company, he really found that the medicine they were using in India was making people better, and it was using this medicinal E. It was actually part of the Psychopharm Pharmacology Manual in the U.S. from 1851 to 1941. So these roots go back, and it ends with the Compassionate Care Act in 1996, in which California became the first state in the U.S. to be able to utilize it for medicinal. And what we've seen from 1996 to 2015 has been historical in terms of the re-acception of it as a medicinal agent.
Okay, the second question, and this time we start with Mr. Romney. The second question, what are the most prominent false misconceptions regarding marijuana which have been debunked by scientific research? For example, marijuana is a gateway drug, marijuana is much more dangerous than substances such as alcohol, tobacco, or prescription medications. Mr. Romney?
Well, the use of marijuana to go into another drug, I don't believe in that. I've been using marijuana so long, and no other drug can enhance me. I don't drink no booze. And the use of marijuana, when you use marijuana, it's just relaxing mode, you know. Some people say you don't function, some people say you get freaky. I mean, I ain't experienced that, and I've been smoking most of my life, and I don't think it's true what they say that if you use marijuana, then next week you want to do cocaine, then you want to do heroin, then you want to do all kind of stupidness like that, but I don't agree with that.
It is stated that that when children use marijuana, especially those who have childhood problems, they are the ones who really develop being hooked on really hard drugs. So eventually, in a nutshell, you find troubled youth. Actually, we need to find out what is troubling them so we won't have problem with them being hooked on hard drugs. But not that cannabis is a drug that leads for you to use other hard drugs. And I need to let you know, remember also that it is in relationship with genetics and also with the state of the person's mind when they start to use this particular.
The points that I tried to make earlier about having structured, formalized control. One of the reasons that marijuana gets tied up with other harder drugs is because now, because it's illegal and not structured in its distribution quality, to get it, you have to sometimes go into atmospheres and into situations where dangerous and bad people are, and where you're liable to then get introduced because you're in the wrong environment. If it's properly structured, properly standardized, and properly distributed, then we will eliminate even this discussion about it.
I actually agree with both of those statements. I see, in my practice, I see more issues with hydrocodone and that sort of thing coming out of the parents' medicine cabinet as being the gateway, since it is much harder to retain, and as he says, and it is starting in that youth that you're talking about. And I agree, you need to identify those kind of problems, but I don't see marijuana as the gateway. I see other substances being that.
I think actually the biggest misconception is that if it were to be legalized, all of a sudden everybody would be smoking. It'd be like Woodstock in the streets. Quite the contrary. And one of the reasons why I think the timing is so right for us to have this discussion is there's been other states, other countries that have done this experiment for us, if you will. So actually in Colorado, usage among teens, based on the same survey that was done in 2010 and then again in 2014, went down by a few percentage points. And there's been absolutely no sign of all of a sudden everybody is starting to smoke. People who want to smoke are smoking anyway right now. So I think that's the biggest misconception, that once it's legalized, it's going to be, you know, like I said, Woodstock in the streets.
When we think about a substance that's illegal, to me that says dangerous, right? It's dangerous, it's illegal. And yet we have so many more lethal substances that are not illegal. Alcohol for one, tobacco, prescription pain medicines. All of these lead to huge amounts of recidivism. They have the health complications, therefore, are magnified many, many times. The death rate is 400,000% more when it comes to alcohol than to cannabis use. There is not a documented death from cannabis use. In terms of the reincarceration, 5 million individuals, alcohol was associated with violent crime in the U.S. There's zero, they don't even have a category for it in terms of violent crime linked to marijuana usage. These are just some common, when we think about a substance that's illegal, we think of it as being dangerous, and it's not. We are, as a society, we admit far more lethal substances into our culture with great harmful consequences, and we call them okay.
I am not interested in a gateway. I'm not interested what other people think about marijuana. I want to see if my civil liberty is that I can make my own choice. I don't know what a civil liberty is. I only know a liberty from my mind. Is that civil or criminal? I don't know. But if I decide to use marijuana, I do not use or in combination with alcohol. That's my choice. I want to stay that, and I want to stay with that.
Actually, scientists continue to investigate the safety of it due to the THC that is inside marijuana. It's the main ingredients of it. And by the way, I just wanted to say from now on that the FDA have not really approved it. That doesn't say that it does not have any properties, that it is correct. You understand? Because they do use it for medicine, they do use it for pain medication, etc. But then it is still in process. So I am a little skeptical in answering this because I haven't done the research myself. It's what I've read, and therefore I remain that only something, even though they have legalized indeed medication with much more complication, but you find that the FDA approved it. So we want to keep in the law area, FDA must approve the benefits. They have imitation of the THC that takes away pain, but it is not as yet approved. It is still in the pipeline.
There are now, with scientific development and genetic crossbreeding, they can take the THC out of it, and they can only have the medicinal properties from it. So you don't actually get high. You can only use the oils and things for medicinal purpose. So there are all different ways that it can be used for medicine. And so I think that the scientific evidence is that mounting, the American Medical Association has supported it for medical use as well too, that it is scientifically based good as a medicine.
Well, certainly it doesn't deserve the Schedule I rating. It is not lethal like the other Schedule I drugs are. There are risks and benefits to every medication that you take, and this particular medicine would be included in that. So it becomes Is what we treating the risk of taking this medicine less than the benefits? Are the benefits going to be more by taking this? Are you going to feel better? Are you going to live longer? Are you going to have a better livelihood, lifestyle than not? And if it's a small risk, then that needs to be assessed, and those risks have to be discussed with each patient individually.
I believe there's been many well-documented cases of the medical benefits. One that really stood out to me was the one that Dr. Dan Johnson referred to earlier, was with the little girl that was having thousands of seizures a week, and from extracting from the plants, they didn't have any THC in that particular strand. Her seizures were down to 1 or 2 per day, and that was a very powerful story to watch. I also have heard countless testimonies from a lot of professional athletes. I've seen NFL players come out now and say that it really helps with rehabilitation from injury and pain. I've also heard cancer patients speaking about how it's helped with dealing with chemo and other things. But I think the science is still evolving, and I think there's still more and more medicinal purposes that are being discovered, and there's a lot of research, more and more research that's being done in that area. So I think we're still discovering more of its medical benefits.
The research is really emerging in this area at a phenomenal rate, and the genetics behind the growth of the industry is really fueling this. They have been able to isolate, as previous panelists have discussed, the THC out of the element and use the CBD part of that. And the CBD is linked to so many very, very good, you can almost eliminate the THC. Not all marijuana makes you high. There are so many different strains at this point that you can actually custom boutique it to eliminate the high out of it and use it for medicinal purposes exclusively, or be able to use a cross-reference of THC with CBD. There's a lot of research out there that talks about the effectiveness. And these are the medicines, these are the medicinal applications which have been thrown out there so far that is backed by research. This does not mean that it cures these things. It means that it helps with the symptoms of these disease clusters, including cancer, glaucoma, HIV, AIDS, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, seizures, Crohn's disease, post-traumatic stress disorder, nausea, appetite changes, chronic pain, and anxiety. And you think about, a lot of those are neurological ailments, which I deal with exclusively. And the medicines off the shelf that are approved by the FDA make my patients sick, really sick. And they hate taking them. Compliance is an issue. And more people are talking about, it's almost like a dirty secret. I'm like, well, how are you medicating yourself? And they go, if you don't tell anybody, I'll tell you. I'm like, why? I'm smoking, or I'm inhaling, or I'm eating it as an edible, or I'm using the oils. You know, and so people are doing this anyway for medicinal purposes, but they have to go see a drug dealer to get it, which is not the way it should be.
I think if we're talking about medical legalization, that's part of the total legalization. Every law is in that way very reasonable. Every law, and especially the Landsverordnung, the Opium Landsverordnung, that's the law regarding the hard drugs, that's an exception. As an exception for opium and for morphine, and only based on a prescription of a doctor. And if we go in the traffic law, you're not allowed to speed over the 50. But if the ambulance is driving with all the lights on and blowing the horns, they are allowed to go over it. So in every law we have exceptions. But I agree with Dr. Rudd, we should first investigate what is the medical benefit of it, and not watch to the American FPK or how they call it, but look at it in a proper medical way. Then it goes.
Medicinal advantages is that I use it as a medicine and I have no problem with it, but if others know that I'm using it as a medicine, they will be like, yo, that thing is illegal and you shouldn't be doing that. It's illegal for who wanted to be illegal. Ever since I know myself, I always heard them say it was illegal. But after I speak to the doctor way back and he tell me, no, if you ain't getting no pain when you use it, go ahead. It wasn't illegal to me anymore, so if I get the chance to get it, I got it. And if you have to wait for, like they say, if you have to wait for Parliament to legalize it for you, it will never happen. So forget about your Parliament, get your seeds, plant it out back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romney. The fourth question is, what is the purpose and reason of legalizing marijuana for religious use?
Well, my basis of civil liberties. If you have a religious faith that it is incorporated into, such as Rastafarians, such as Sufis, such as several different groups, then I think that you should have the legal civil liberty rights to use it. And I think that we should also be a little bit realistic about some bizarre practices of many religions in terms of what they do as practice. There is a religion that eats the body and drinks the blood of their Savior as a ritual activity. So there are some very unusual practices, and I think it's about civil liberty more than anything, but I think that the religious aspect is something that has to be respected.
From a personal standpoint, I would never, ever try to tell somebody else what to believe. And in their belief, I would never, ever try to tell them that you can't use this, can't use that, whether it's mine, whether it's peyote in the United States, or whether it's marijuana.
I certainly believe everybody should have the right to practice whatever religion or faith they believe in. I certainly have a lot of respect for the Rastafarian faith, but it's important to note that not every Rasta smokes marijuana, and not everybody that smokes marijuana is a Rasta. So I don't think, for me, like Dr. Havisar said, I think it's more about civil liberties. I don't think you should have to belong to a certain faith to have the right to consume marijuana if you wish to.
Along the same token, if we're Protestant, if we're Catholic, if we're Buddhist, if we're Rastafari, if we're Native American, we all have our own religious faith, sacramental process, and I think that should be an open book for them to practice as they would feel. And there's a historical precedent for this. If you look at the roots of sacramental, the peyote back in the Native American Indians and the use of marijuana for literally hundreds of years, that goes back there. It's not a Johnny-come-lately kind of idea, an excuse to do what have you, but they should have the religious freedom, which is how I do it.
I do not have much with religious. I'm a common sense man. If we look in St. Martin, we have as much churches as we have schools. If we have as much schools and much possibilities, it becomes a chaos. Leave rituals out of it and legalize it or not, but don't give it a smoke like it is for religion, reason, allowed or not allowed. People start praying before they go in court when there is a court case. I understand. But if you never pray to God, then do not pray for him in the last minute. And if our Almighty God at the Last Supper is serving wine to his disciples, so then take your marijuana before you go to court.
Thank you, Mr. Ness. Mr. Romney?
With the, how you say, the religious department, everyone has a right to decide. And my decision is, if it's there for us, let's just use it. Amen.
Yes, I just want to read this text that is found in Romans 12. Verses 1. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. With that, I rest my peace.
What are the advantages of St. Martin to proceed towards medicinal, religious, recreational use legalization of marijuana? And now we start with Dr. Golden.
I think it's the medical tourism, I think, from our side, my side of it, there's opportunity with this, with legalization, especially on the medical side, to be a leader in this particular area, in this particular geographic area, to develop this. And I think the first in is a good idea.
I think there's many benefits that could be realized, but the most important is it has to be done in a responsible manner. I've looked at a few different brainstorming business models where here in St. Martin we could realistically generate between $2, maybe $3 million a year in tax revenue from the legalization of marijuana. Again, there's so many great testimonies that currently exist. Just some interesting data. In 2014 in Colorado, Sales between medicinal and recreational exceeded $500 million. They generated close to $60 million in tax revenue. Real estate went up almost 9% on residential values. It's almost impossible to get commercial real estate anywhere in the state of Colorado now. Warehousing space has become impossible to find. So it's had a lot of positive effects on their economy. You can certainly see how we can mirror that and adapt it to our economy here. And definitely adding to what the doctor just said, I think the medical tourism side of it as well could be very easily implemented here.
Clearly, from my perspective, the advantage would be the medical tourism, to be able to offer individuals in the countries that frequent St. Martin, South America, North America, Europe, an opportunity for more holistic treatment. And I think opening up a gateway in the Caribbean. And I'm not talking about a head shop. I'm not talking about, oh, we're able to do this. I'm talking about genetically controlled strains that are specifically geared towards their ailment. One-stop shopping for a holistic, or a truly holistic approach. I think it would be a showstopper in the Caribbean and would push St. Martin to the forefront of this. If we do this, let's do it right. Let's do it well, and be exceptional at what we do. And I think that's what we should do. That, coupled with the idea that prohibition has never, ever been proven to be successful in any kind of model, and that's a failure here. Prohibiting a substance that people are going to want to use anyway never works. We might as well control it, legalize it, have a vehicle to use it for us versus against us.
I have nothing with taxes, and I have nothing with special tax, because then you put marijuana in a competition with alcohol and cigarettes. And then it comes in the benefit of the government. Government is raising the price of cigarettes in Holland because they make a lot of money out of it because people are addicted. Leave the tax, leave government out of this. But if you ask me for my personal opinion, open a coffee shop in St. Martin and start smoking marijuana. Start smoking marijuana and you will get all the Americans who have a problem in the United States coming over to St. Martin. That is for the tourists very good thing. And sell it on the beach with the beach vendors. That is also a possibility. But do not charge it with taxes. The other thing, what my thinking is, if you have a coffee shop, control it. Because the front door is for the people to come and join their smoking. But the back door is for the criminals. Because if you do not grow it by yourself, if you have not control about how to deliver it, the criminals will take over the back door and then it's over, it's killed.
Like Paul just said, we should be able to have our coffee shop and our legal growers so that our substance can be always fresh and always available. And the tourists will keep coming, because they're done coming already.
I believe one of the advantages for St. Martin will be that our prison will have less people inside them because of illegal dealing with drugs.
Can I have one more little addition? Less than half a minute. I see in the fourth question we are talking about the youth, but we are talking about adults, because I thought that the youngest, under the age of 18, should not use it. Why should we have a program for them, and why we don't make a program for the adults? We're always blaming the youngsters.
Dr. Henderson.
I just want to follow up on this law aspect. A Harvard study in 2010 showed that prohibition of marijuana on the state and federal level was costing $17 billion a year in the U.S. We can alleviate our police force from having to deal with enforcement. We can alleviate our prisons from incarcerating people for a victimless crime and a personal act. And I think that'll save us a lot right there.
Very important. If it's introduced into our society, into our economy, most important things, which I think we've all touched on several times, is controlling the sale or making sure it's not sold to minors, people that might have mental disorders, and creating awareness campaigns that target the youth and educate them on the harms of using it at a young age. So I think that would be the most important guidelines that we implement from the very beginning.
marijuana poses its greatest risk to the developing brain. And so I know everybody keeps on saying, you know, nobody under the age 18, but for me it's definitely much more of a personal, professional perspective on that. It is a negative influence below the age of 18 because the brain is still very much forming. We see issues with memory, attention concentration, multitasking, initiating behavior, which is the opposite of procrastination in younger minds that are smoking marijuana. So I think that would be a huge, issue for me, is that absolutely nobody under age 18. The other thing which I think is really important is, I've enjoyed being in St. Martin, and I think people don't want to see it become where people are just sitting on the corner smoking this and smoking that. I think this is for private use, not for public use. I think there are a lot of dispensaries where we can control frequency, we can control taxation, we can control, this is not a free-for-all. And I think with these kind of parameters put in place, I think we can make a real push. And there's models for this. There's 25 states in the union that have legalized this, 3 for recreational, there's a wide swath of countries have legalized it. There's a lot of information out there on how to do it and to do it right.
Yes, with this question, I feel I'm in church again. This question is, in my opinion, discriminating because no public usage permitted. Why we can drink alcohol in the whole village? And why we can smoke everywhere, but we cannot smoke? This is not good. This is a moralist. This is the church. The other thing is sold only at licensed dispensaries. Okay, that's good. Maybe the political parties are interested in this. You must be a member in good standing. Can you tell me one St. Martin office is of a good standing? No. That's a moralistic point of view. It's antisocial. If you only are alone, if you are from a good standing, I am not alone. Not under the age of 18. What is that? I started smoking when I was 15. And now I cannot smoke marijuana when I'm 15 because I have to be 18. Who's telling me that I have to be 18?
You just heard the brain doctor, so.
Shouldn't be limited for senior citizens like myself. Should be always readily available and keep it away from the kids. That's for sure. Yeah, that's my opinion.
I needed to say that even though people make their own choices, but we need to respect those who do not want to. I either suffer from secondary smoking. Sometimes you just be around people who smoke. The secondary smoker is the one who are most affected because they don't blow out whatever is in their lungs. And not only that, we are here to actually place a system in where we're going to see or educate our people more. Lamentably, I find the pros for St. Martin, we still have to remain with the respect for other people who do not want to do any type of secondary inhalation of anything of the sort that they are not comfortable with. And number two, a neurophysicist, actually a neuroscientist in the Institution of Cognitive Science in the College of London has stated that the frontal lobe is still in development even after the age of 30. And they have discovered also that that is the area where people make reasonable decisions. Now, when a person is all that and they cannot make reasonable decisions, where do we stand? Remember, this is not for everyone, and I'm advocating for those who is not for it. If there are sick people outside there, who, if they use it, they will be a nuisance to the community. If you can use cannabis and it can be good for you, fine and dandy. But for those who it is not good for, we need to advocate for them too. Because once it's an open policy for all, eventually you're going to find yourself with a relative, even though you went to do it as a social recreative thing, it's going to be with the issue that you have to deal with. And when they start stealing to buy these things and to do other stuff, you're going to get yourself into a problem. There is the pro and the cons of all of these. I do respect those who want to use it, but then we have to respect those who do not want to be part of it.
I would also like to point out on a very personal use aspect, the Alaska laws, which have been in effect for a very long time, are that you can grow your own at home up to 5 plants. You can grow your own for your own personal use. And then you don't get involved in any of this public or exterior situation. So there are different models that can be also applied. But I believe that we do need stringent controls, and I don't agree with Mr. Mex about the fact that it should be openly in a public context, because I think that your point about the secondhand smoke is very important as well. But when you have it in a closed context, only those who choose to do it are involved in it. And I think that that's an important point.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen.
Man, I think my colleagues are really right. We're trying to sell this in Point Blanche.
Dr. Golden.
I don't know if I can add much to the discussion. It's been very good. I do think a control model is needed because of people who do not want to partake in this. The public usage is an issue for people who have allergies, who have chronic bronchitis and that sort of thing that may be affected by a secondhand smoke. So there needs to be some sort of structure to it. This is a model that has seemed to work well both in the U.S. and several other countries too.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. And now we're reaching the last question, and we're going to start with Dr. Johnson answering it. The 7th question, medicinal marijuana has been legalized for medicinal use in 23 states of the United States and recreational use in 3 states. It has recently been decriminalized in Jamaica, Bangladesh, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, North Korea, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, and Uruguay. They have legalized marijuana for many years. What have we learned from these countries which have been progressive regarding their approach to marijuana? Dr. Johnson?
I think what we learned from these models is that the fear is incorrect. There's a reason why these models have doubled, tripled, quadrupled over the years. From 1996, when the Compassionate Care Act in California was presented, we've gone from no states having any type of legalization to 25 as of yesterday. The reason why you see so much is because it works. If it doesn't work, why would people keep on trying to do this? And this, you've seen how much just this panelist is not divided in their views, but have different takes on things. And people in the audience probably have their own perspective on things as well, for sure. Imagine that at a state legislative level, where everybody has a different, and yet they all come together. Not everybody who in these 25 states are pro-marijuana, but they see the benefits of it as a holistic whole. 51% of the U.S. is now pro-marijuana. And this is a very interesting change over the years. And I think that the reason why this has happened, because the sky hasn't fallen. Our kids have not become drug addicts. We're not all snorting cocaine and doing awful things that the fear tells us we're going to do, that the propaganda has told us we're going to do over the years. If it wasn't a true model, if it didn't work, we wouldn't see it being replicated with such success from state to state and country to country. So it works. That's why.
What we learn from these countries is not how they do it, but the general conclusion is that we're making progression. That is a positive development. When I was a young prosecutor in the end 70s, in the 80s, we started prosecuting everyone who has 5 gram or less than 5 gram marijuana. But look, now in 2015, and we accept out of a sudden that you are allowed to smoke, and people try to grow marijuana in St. Martin also. And one political issue, if the Netherlands allow it, and we are part of the Netherlands, we are allowed to do it.
Being that we are a young new country now, and like I keep pushing this towards the parliament, it is time for us to grow up and be able to, as we say, as elders, be able to grow our own stuff out back to make our tea. And if the government want to involve themselves, they could make funds and do sidewalks for disabled people, do school recreation center for kids, handicapped kids and stuff like that. It is possible as a new country to look forward and go into that. And I do hope that whenever it comes on the referendum, that every St. Martin will vote yes for the legalization of the medical herb ganja. Thank you.
The majority has not always been right. That doesn't take away that we can learn about our approach toward marijuana for our little country. But I think St. Martin have so many other issues to deal with. And as we grow along, and as we go through our growing pains, we are going to learn how to handle this situation as it comes. Because I know when the states sneeze, we catch the cold. If something happened in Holland, everybody wants to imitate it. But is it this what we as Caribbean people want for our people? If they say it is yes, then we need to deal with it. If for those who say that they do not want this, we need to also respect their opinion.
Basically, I agree with Mr. Mex's point that we are part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and so therefore we should be able to utilize that instrument of association to stand up a little bit stronger and make big decisions. That's the politicians here need to stand up and make serious decisions about what's going on with this. All these medical descriptions and everything, the economic potentials of it are enormous. Why aren't we making these big decisions? And instead of hiding behind taboo and fear, we need to make big decisions about it.
I think one thing that we learned in looking back on it with these other countries in these states, there is a price for doing what we are doing right now. There's a social price for that, with, especially in the U.S. where we jail more people than anybody else in the world. That's the social price we're paying now. So we look at these kind of models and decide, socially as a country, socially as a state, is it better to have a controlled access to this, or is it better to incarcerate every 15, 16-year-old kid with a gram of marijuana? So there are consequences of what we're doing now, and this is why things are changing, because people don't like those consequences. I think that's one of the things you look back at these things to see, if as those change, less crime in a lot of these areas, reduction in incarceration, less money spent on prisons. I think those are things that you need to factor in too.
There's a lot of great information out there and a lot that we can learn from the existing models. The existing models work, they're great, but they have good and bad things that we can learn from them. Some of the good that I'd like to point out, in Spain they have a model of cannabis clubs which seems to facilitate or create opportunities for a lot of small entrepreneurs and perhaps prevents the industry from being monopolized. I definitely have appealed to that model. Also in Colorado, one of the things I like is they put a lot of money back. A lot of the tax revenue goes back towards awareness campaigns. In 2014, it was estimated almost $10 million from tax revenue from cannabis was spent towards awareness campaigns, specifically targeting youth. And I think that's definitely a model we can learn from. Some of the bad things with the existing models that we need to point out, a lot of the systems have a conflict, which create and facilitate opportunities for the underworld and criminal element. For example, in Holland, you can possess small quantities, coffee shops are allowed to sell it, but mass production of it is not allowed. So what happens is these coffee shops have to buy from the black market or from people that are producing it illegally. Also in the United States, there's a conflict between the federal law and the state laws that have legalized it or decriminalized it, which basically prevents people in the cannabis industry from using the banking system. So everything is done in cash. And if you want to facilitate an environment for the criminal world, cash is a great way to go. So definitely if it's implemented here in St. Martin, I think we need to learn from both the good and the bad that exist. If we had an entire cannabis industry flown on cash, I think MOT would have a field day here with us. And Yeah, I think there's a lot that can be learned from the existing models. So we should implement it responsibly and in a way that fits our society and our economy.
If you have a question, please say who you would like to answer it. There's a microphone here.
Just a general question for the panel, really, is between the difference between hemp and marijuana, and the difference between St. Martin, French St. Martin, and Dutch St. Martin, the difference between the French law and the Dutch law, between who's allowed to grow it and not grow it legally, hemp and marijuana.
Who would like to start answering?
Well, just the hemp marijuana part. Hemp marijuana plant. The hemp is the fibrous structure of the stem, and it's 70% cellulose, so it's a really fibrous structure. So that's why it's always been so good for rope and fabrics. So that's the hemp part of it is the stem. It's the same plant. Now there are male plants and female plants. The male plants produce more stem, whereas the female plants produce more of the THC and the psychoactive chemicals.
But now, here's a good question. Let's say now about if we legalize on the 16 square mile, what's gonna happen on the French side? With the 20, with the 26. I mean, we want to know with the 21. Let me see what happens.
Okay, we have a saying in Dutch, it goes in the French way. It means that it always comes later than we Dutch go. There are international treaties to make sure that you do not pay double taxes. There are international agreements that if you commit a crime here or there, that they can expedite you. Why we cannot have a regulation with the French government about the issue of growing marijuana on the Dutch side and on the French side? It's just a matter of on top. They have to meet each other, make an agreement, and it's done.
Okay. Any more questions, sir?
So can I get this clarified? Because my reading of the internet on hemp, that was two different products. They're both the same product of cannabis, but marijuana plant is a different version of cannabis to industrial marijuana. It's different plants.
Can I?
Dr. Douglas.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, there are multiple plants because they are crossbreeding the plants nowadays. And you find, especially for those who are on the black market, when they crossbreed these, you find that stronger the THC is going to be in them. So therefore you find the hemp, even though it's part of the stem, but it is the part that has less THC, it's 1%. And I needed you to know that the marijuana effect, the psychoactive effect, is strongest when the plant is either cooked or boiled or heat is attached to it. So there are different types, because if you look at different photos, there are different types of the leaves itself. So then you're going to ask another question: how can we really help people who want to go into this not to cross that line when there are so many different types and you find so many different strengths, and the way that they use it, they do not know how to control themselves? How are you going to reach that moment of control?
Mm-hmm.
I think in addition to that, we have experience in Holland with the control, or not control. We start to control the amount of marijuana. Let's say 1 kilo. 1 kilo is used by 10 people. But now we have an airplane with Americans from New York who want to go in a coffee shop in Holland because they want to smoke. Then you have 100 people extra. Where you get that from? Mm-hmm. And then the black market is coming up. That is a situation that we should think about. It's in Holland at this moment in the jurisprudence, you see that a lot of coffee shops owners do not have enough marijuana to deliver to the people. And to make sure that they do not go in the illegal way, they start growing the marijuana by themselves. So we have some court cases, about 5 this year 3, and the appeal judges sentence them in a way, okay, you are not allowed to do it, but you do not get any sentence allowed. So that is the next progress of the last question. Even the judges do not sentence you for it, especially when you have a good argument why you have 20 kilo in stock instead of 1 kilo that is low. Because I have so many customers. If I have a restaurant or a cafe and I'm only allowed to 10 bottles of beer to sell, and I have 20 people, I have to use my creativity.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Dr. Hammerson.
This opens up a very real economic potential on the island here as well too, and that is agricultural production. That is also an area where there could be employment and there could be economic development through agricultural production on the island.
Okay. Another question?
Good evening. My question is probably a very silly question, and I'm going to pretend that I'm very uninformed. This is a first step in bringing awareness towards the island, bringing awareness towards the citizens. If we're going into the direction of decriminalizing it or legalizing it, anybody on the panel can answer, or everybody on the panel can answer, what besides this first step do we have to do as citizens? How do we get from where we are today to, for instance, the Netherlands or Colorado?
First of all, we have to make our new political party.
Yeah.
That's common sense. If you leave it to the UP, the NA, or whatever they have, if there is no benefit for them or the party, you will never get any step forward. If you come together and you reunite, like we have the union for the laborers, they can make a fist because they are united. So if the marijuana users, breeders, dealers want to get the first step done, organize your own political party and get the majority.
I do agree with that.
I don't necessarily think that has to be the approach. You don't necessarily need to create a political party just to get this movement forward. I think the conversation needs to continue, the awareness needs to continue, and typically, as soon as it becomes more of a mainstream topic, I think the politicians will react to whatever will get them votes.
Thank you, Mr. I saw someone raising their hands in the back.
Have you ever seen a political reacting?
For votes, yes. For votes, yes.
Okay.
One option is, of course, a referendum. That is one legal mechanism that could be, it is not a legally binding issue, but at least it makes a public statement that the politicians can see that if a referendum does approve that a majority or a sufficient enough portion of the population says, yes, they want decriminalization, then at least it's a statement that can be used in the political solution.
What I hear now is I agree with a referendum, but that is so Dutch. If you do not want to solve a problem, make a referendum. And you will never get out of it.
What will then be the
alternative? Join the political party and do what you have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Gass. There is a question.
I think to answer your question for a second, one of the things that gets around both these ideas is the will of the people. Last time I checked, we're a democracy. And when people say, this is what I want, this is what I think we should do, and the politicians will follow that, they have to follow that. if we as people stand up and say, this is what we want, this is important to us, this is important to our culture, what we're going to try to do. So it's idealistic, it's naive, but I think we're still a democracy.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Another question from the...
Yes, good evening. Now, from an agricultural point of view, because we are an island in the Caribbean, which has great weather and potential for its growth locally. So what would then be the steps? Because of course we have a few local growers who are growing the papayas and the mango and the bananas now. How can we locally now add that to our agricultural portfolio?
We got to legalize it first.
Thank you. There is a question in the back.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the panelists for their great, comments and information about this in general. And I hope that this forum is followed up by another one based off of the questions that I'm about to ask. So recently, Obama visited Jamaica, and there was a similar forum like this where people could pose questions. And one of the things that he said was, to me, was very profound, which had to do with, because basically someone asked, what do you think about the legalization of marijuana in Jamaica and the Caribbean in general, right? So one thing that he said that really struck me is that in a lot of the countries where it has become legal, you now have a lot of bigger multinational corporations coming in and honing in on the small, average, marijuana industry. So that I feel is a very important thing to consider. How we would maybe deal with that, where we would go, because you can go legalization, you can go decriminalization for medical, you can go decriminalization for recreational, etc., etc. Another thing that he mentioned is once you have the legalization of marijuana or whatever form of it there is, what happens to other illegal drugs? Where do you draw the line for, because now people who wanted marijuana to be legal is maybe that the case, but what happens now for other harder narcotics? Where do you draw the line? So I don't know if it's so much of a question that I have or just something to consider. Like I said, I would hope that this forum is followed up with another one that can really go into the different models of legalizing, because I know, Spain has their cannabis club model, you have recreational use for everyone in Colorado, you have decriminalization, so you just don't go to jail. So I don't know, I didn't really have a panelist in particular to direct my question to, but if you have any comments, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's a great comment and a great statement there. Personally, I would like to see it, if it's introduced, done in a way that it's not monopolized, that creates jobs and opportunities for small, medium-sized entrepreneurs. And there are a lot of models that do exist that could facilitate that. You made reference to the cannabis clubs in Spain. I think that's a successful model that's working, and we can kind of tweak it and see how we can implement it here in our community. With reference to the harder drugs, I think that's an entirely different conversation. And I agree, there needs to be follow-up discussion from here on the different models that could work in St. Martin. But I think the conversation of harder drugs is a whole different topic and a whole different conversation that brings in so many different elements. In this case, we're talking about a natural herb. And I think that's where we have to start and base this conversation from.
Thank you. Dr. Harrison?
I think that distinction of the hard drugs and marijuana really needs to be based in science. And the hard scientific evidence will clearly show which ones are more dangerous and which ones are not. And so I think that will be the basis of making those kinds of distinctions. But I do want to reiterate what Ruth just said, and that marijuana is a natural, direct product plant. And it's not like a synthetic process type of item. So I think that in itself also speaks to its natural and more direct form. I think science will be the basis for those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Yes.
Another question?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Roberto Arendelle. And I'm sorry for coming late, but I'd like to react to what the young lady said. There's an embargo placed on the Caribbean in terms of drugs, drug trade, marijuana trade within the United States. Although it is legalized somewhat in Jamaica, the question would be, how would they get it out with this embargo still being there? And if I'm not mistaken, that has not been lifted as yet. Another question, maybe Mr. Marks can answer that. Recently in Holland, where they had the experience of having these coffee shops, they've placed, there's a new ordinance that came out March 1st, prohibiting the growth of marijuana in certain instances if it's not by the owners, because it's under this disguise to plant opium.
Who is going to answer this one? Or react on it? Mr. Metz.
Okay, what I told you already, in Holland, we have a guide, a big book, and that's a timetable for the trains coming in. But there's no train coming in time. In St. Martin, we don't need a book because we don't have trains. So do not compare and just learn. The last question was, what can we learn from these countries who have already experience with it? Don't look too greedy to what they allow. See what criminal effects they have, especially in Holland. Especially the Minister of Justice in Holland is fighting a fight. In Holland, they say he will never win. It's a fight that the United States started to fight with, but you never win it. It takes a lot of money. The coffee shops should be controlled, as it was in the beginning. But as it becomes more usual to go to Holland, even Japanese come not only with a camera, but they go in and have the marijuana. It means that the front door is growing and the back door is organized, to stay organized. There is no piece of creativity. If it is punishable, it's punishable, and then go to the court. But the court say, okay, it is punishable, we do not punish you. So it's a circle where you get in. And we should stay out of it. Legalize it, and without any condition. Do not allow what we have with prostitution. We have a prostitution on St. Martin policy that we allow it, not like this. But it is not controlled. It is not controlled. We think we control it, but it is not controlled.
Thank you. I would like to say we have about 10 more minutes.
I think in follow-up to Mr. Merck's point about we need to make our own model. I think that's very important. We need to come up with our own model. And I believe that this agricultural production, our own production, would be one of the solutions in that direction.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. We have about 10 more minutes, so I think that means 2 more questions. Thank you. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My question is to the medical doctors. Can you compare and contrast cigarette smoke with marijuana smoke for health effects?
Dr. Douglas?
Any type of smoke will affect the tissues of your lungs. It will. So eventually you find that cigarette smoke has been compared because of the tar, the nicotine inside of it, that it is quite dangerous or with adverse effects to our health. You find that marijuana now, The effect that it has when it is heated or smoked, you find that it's the THC that is relieved in that aspect. Now, people choose different ways of smoking. Some say I just inhale it and I puff it out. Others say no, I swallow it, etc., etc. But the whole issue is it is smoking. Be it cannabis, be it cigarette, be it cigar, it has the same effect on a person.
Thank you, Dr. Golden.
I agree that there are some deleterious effects as far as bronchitis. I think there are some studies ongoing now comparing cancer rates in people who smoke THC versus cigarettes, and the data is not in on that yet. It doesn't look like that there's going to be a significant amount of difference. There's some evidence also that THC actually dilates the bronchus, which would be a reduction in the amount of bronchitis and that sort of thing that you see.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
The amount of tar, typically, you hear different studies talk about the impact of the tar. And I think one of the ways to really get around that is to use more, I guess, more up-to-date ideas in terms of vaporizers, using oils, use as edibles to avoid the smoke component of that. I've read a number of articles on it. They really have gone back and forth on the idea. To their knowledge, does not have the same lung cancer impact that tobacco use has.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Now we have the last question. Okay, 2 more questions? 2 more questions. Definitely, the last 2.
Good night. I was just wondering, what are the current laws on the usage, possession, or cultivation of marijuana right now in St. Martin?
Mr. Max? I think you are the one to answer that.
It is not allowed.
That's easy.
Let me make things clear. It is not allowed. Do they look over it? I think yes. When I was in the prison this afternoon by 2 o'clock, I finished working. I had to see a client, and I told the guard, "Do I smell cigarettes or do I smell marijuana?" And she said, "It's a mix of both." That means there is a certain of tolerance already by certain authorities. Okay. If they are straightforward, they would say you're not allowed to smoke marijuana. But if you have 8 years to run in prison, you're smoking marijuana. But in the general, it is illegal. It is illegal.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox. And the last question for tonight.
Good night. I just wanted to make a quick gesture and also ask a question. Basically, I've been doing a lot of research myself about medicinal herbs and especially cannabis. And me myself have done extremely well on the medicinal purposes. The main thing I wanted to bring to the table, 1 second, like with bronchitis and with epilepsy, I used to suffer from both as a young child. And from the age of like 9 to 13, I suffered severely with asthma and bronchitis. And that was the only thing my mother gave to me. I started smoking maybe when I was 11. And at that point in time, I never suffered from asthma and bronchitis. I've been sick with epilepsy for the past 8 years when I started to go to school in Holland. And no matter all the medication the doctors ever gave me for years, sometimes I couldn't even function. I see in double, I had to stop work, can't drive a car, can't go on the road. And for the past 2 years, off of the medication myself, and just dealing with cannabis, exercise, and watching my diet and going into a strict vegan diet, it has worked miracles to the point where I've not even had 1 seizure in 2 years. And doctors can't even explain, but they have to tell me, keep doing what I'm doing, but they cannot give me the assistance to be able to consume it for myself legally, because it's helped me. So my question, two simple questions was, is a doctor not supposed to be in the best interest of his patient? And also, if you, as a person, have a business as a landscaper, for example, and you decide to go and do some landscaping, and your landscape is considered a bunch of cannabis plants, how legally does somebody tell you as a general agricultural something, can they stop you basically from setting up your landscape with plants. That was it.
Mr. Mayor, you said it is illegal.
Unfortunately, I'm a lawyer. It is illegal. What you suffer from it doesn't matter to me. I respect it, but agricultural marijuana is straightforward. It's illegal. And I do not play a game. I do not fool around with, yes, if you do it behind the window, or you do it in the garden of the neighbors, and all these kinds of things, it is illegal. But you need a lot of clear.
Thank you. Loud and clear. This was our last question. I think it's, anyone else want to react? Dr. Douglas?
I do want to react on this because indeed your health is of great interest to us. But you find that a lot of people want health, but they do not want the sacrifice that comes with it. Besides using the cannabis, I've heard something very essential, that you have changed your lifestyle. You exercise and you also eat healthy, which a lot of people don't want that part. They just want the height of the cannabis, but they do not want the part of eating healthy, exercising, and keeping holistically their body in a holistic form. I am not discussing the issue that cannabis will not heal your condition, because it has been proven, even though it is still in the pipeline. Like any other thing, just like medication for HIV, just like medication that they're using for any other things, they are still studying it. So as we grow along with science, lamentably, because I am not proud to sit here actually to discuss things that I do not do for myself. But then, fact is fact. It is a herb that is being used. There are positive benefits of it, but there's also something that we need to look into, and therefore you find that how can we best bring this to a point where everybody is going to stay happy. You understand me? That is the whole point. But when we're talking about health, health is not only about using one specific thing, it is about a holistic choice. It is about your eating healthy, it is about your using, sleeping on time, it is about also exercising, where we find priority actually, not taking much time. Priority now at the World Health Organization is with metabolic syndrome. How can we get people to really realize what they consume is killing them? How can we really realize that people who are diabetic or who have high blood pressure, that their lifestyle is what is bringing this to them? No, they want to keep that lifestyle and still have other things. So I will commend you to have a holistic approach to your health. And eventually, as time seems fit, that they will recognize this, if so deems it, that then other people will also get medication that is legal to help them in these cases. But we start simple.
Thank you. I think we need a big hand for our panelists of tonight.
Yes, we really have to give thanks, and especially for yourself who are here with us tonight, because like when we put this panel together, we look for different people. Like when we see, I give thanks still for the ministers them who send the people them to come and be a part of this, because we want the ministers and the parliamentarians to be here tonight. Especially the police, we wanted to be here tonight because they're the one that have to open doors for us. But it's a pity there's a few of them here who send people who come to get information for them, but we will not give up. Because this is a fight we start now to free our people then, mentally and spiritually. Because when I see everybody singing Bob Marley's song, Emancipation from Mental Slavery, and Bob Marley was the biggest marijuana smoker. I mean, hey, that's what Bob Marley tell you, emancipation from mental slavery. For all this type of mental slavery they got us in, that we are not free. If you want to be free, you have to have your own choices, knowing that every wrong thing you do, you got to pay for it. And every good thing you do, you have your blessing. I mean, we really give thanks for all of them who come out tonight, and even, especially the panelists. And soon you will hear another panel discussion, because this is just the beginning of our journey. Give thanks and praise, and the same blessed spirit that you come here with, you will go to either of your various houses. God love and love blessing.